Well, then I won't keep you very long because I know you have a lot going on, and that things are busy. So I just wanted to check in. How are things since the last time we saw each other?
Good, good, good.
They're good. How is the timer going? Is it still working well for you?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Wonderful. Have you made any changes or any improvements, or is it what you've got it pretty solid?
Um, I wouldn't say any improvements. I just feel like the students are catching on. They're kind of like, okay, he has a timer on, and sometimes I have it on, but it's not it's there. Sometimes I project it, and sometimes I don't project it. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's of course the more they get used to you doing it, the more it will make sense to them
yes,
and
ma'am.
it becomes second nature to them. Excellent. So what I wanted to do today is just to quickly model what this looks like for you. I know you've already been doing it, but it never hurts to see somebody else do it in a separate way. So normally in normal world, when I'm not stuck at home still,
Yeah.
I would model it. There's a couple ways we can do it. I could have come and modeled it with your kids, or you could have come to my class, or multiple things. But the way that works best for us right now, just because of the circumstances, is we're just going to pretend like there are kids here. And I am just going to briefly model it for you. So this isn't going to take very long because I feel like you have a very good grasp of what you need to do.
Okay.
Also,
Are you feeling
uh,
better? Are you feeling better?
uh, tomorrow is my first day back, so we're gonna see. I
Okay.
feel better, but I mean, when you're sick, like you're so tired. That's me. So by this point in the day, I need a nap. So
Yeah.
tomorrow we're gonna see what happens and we're just gonna take it one day at a time. But thank you for asking.
Yes, ma'am.
So think about me tomorrow because I'm gonna be with the
All right.
kids for the first time. Okay, so on top of everything else going on right now, I am getting a replacement work computer because I found out today mine won't let me access the internet. So I can get on Teams and I can do like Word and PowerPoint and stuff, but I can't get on the internet for some reason. So I was going to use the classroom timer that you use to try and model it that way, but it's not going to let me because I can't use the internet. So I'm going to model it the way I would do it in my classroom if this was so let's say this happens to you tomorrow. You can't use the internet tomorrow. This is what I would do in that circumstance. So thankfully I can share Teams with you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use one of my 10th grade world history lessons. So this is actually from today. We did the Black Death. I do a do now first, which I'm sure you do something similar or some sort of eye catcher thing to get them engaged. If you don't, it's something I highly recommend because it gets them started and it gets them like in the mindset of, hey, like we are in class now. Get your mind right. Like it's time to go. So
Yeah.
I always start with a do now. And last week we talked about Charlemagne. So I was having them recall prior knowledge. So that's what this one is they're going to recall prior knowledge. And so if I set the expectation, I don't put a timer up for this one. I set the expectation and I wrote it right here in the slide. It says answer the following before class starts. So at this point, I would come on and say something like, hey guys, welcome to eighth period. As a reminder, eighth period starts at 2 o'clock. You have 5 minutes to do your do now. And that would be my time reminder. And then I might come back in 2 minutes later and say, remember, class starts at 2 o'clock. It's 1:58. You have 2 minutes to complete your do now in the chat. And then I'll also do things like I have the chat open now. I'll do things like I'll say something like do now must be completed in 2 minutes, and I'll throw that in the chat because sometimes I've learned some of them might be reading and not listening, but if they see it in the chat, then it's like, boom, okay. So that would be a way that I would introduce like expectations for time and how I would use time. So then I would say something like, I'm watching you try to tell the kids to be quiet and pay attention at the same time. It's okay. So that's how I would start is that's how I would introduce expectations. So I do it a couple ways. Like you see on the screen, I write my expectations clearly, like this is going to be done before class starts. That is a solid amount of time. Typically it's 5 minutes.
Okay.
Later in the period, I'm going to skip around. Let me find something. I'm not going to teach you the whole Black Death lesson.
Yeah.
But for example, so the question on the previous slide was we recapped the Middle Ages. And then I said, what do you think? Can life get any worse? And then I said, spoiler alert, it can. So today we're going to learn about the Black Death. Based on what you know in the Dark Ages, answer these two questions. So I'll read this and I'll say something like, I expect each question to take 2.5 minutes. So because there are two questions, I will be quiet for the next 5 minutes to let you answer these questions yourself. So I set the expectation clearly. They get 5 minutes. It's 2.5 minutes per question, and I am going to leave them alone for the next 5 minutes. And then I will type those instructions in the chat. So I will say you have, I can't spell today. You have 5 minutes to answer your two questions. Cannot type in your notes starting at, and then I like to add the time. So for example, it's 3:23 right now. So I would say you have 5 minutes to answer your two questions. Is 3:23. I will be back at 3:28. And then I go silent. So I've set the expectation. I've told them how much time they get, how much time it should take them, and then I go quiet so that I'm not interrupting them.
Okay.
So I will say sometimes I get a little antsy and I'll come back and be like, it's been 2 minutes. Like sometimes you just like the quiet, it seems like 50 years and not like 5 minutes.
Yes.
So I will say I do get a little antsy sometimes, but I do find that especially when I give them an extended amount of time, like 5 minutes, I will come back in at the halfway point and be like, hey, like time is halfway done. But if it's something quick, like you have 1 minute to get to Kahoot, I don't need to come back in every 10 seconds and be like 50 seconds, 40 seconds. But when it's a little bit longer, I do like to reinforce, you're halfway done. Please remember you're answering the two questions and we will be finished at 3:28.
Yeah, so what do you do? Okay, so I get the whole do now thing, but you're setting expectations for the students. But what do you do about the kids that are coming in late? How do you get them to still do the do now? Or do you ever get them to do the do now? Or do you kind of just let it be?
It depends. On a day like today, let me back up. On a day like today, when it was just, oh, I'm going the wrong way. This doesn't help you at all. There we go. On a day like today, when it was a prior knowledge, this is one I might have let go if they were running late, just because I am sharing the answers out loud of the classmates. I'm having the classmates discuss this. So they're getting the point that I wanted them to achieve. It's not so much about, did you write in the chat than it is, are you recalling prior knowledge? But if it's something that has to be done, like sometimes I'll do a survey or sometimes I'll do like a short 1-question quiz or something.
Yeah.
If they're late, I make them do that in their asynchronous time. Class, and I think that's important when we talk about time. Class does not stop for you because you were late. It's not fair to everyone else in the room. And I think setting these expectations of time, they're in the room right now so they can hear me, so I'm kind of spoiling it. But once you set that hard line and you're like, class started at 2 o'clock and it's 2:05, you're late, like they will come to understand that. But the do nows, I do pick my battles with those.
Because I know you can't be like a stickler for it all the time, and I guess I was just trying to think of like, okay, I understand the whole point of it, but at the same time, you're gonna always have those latecomers, or their parents drop them off late, or whatever the case is, and I'm just like, okay, so how? I just wanted to know, like, of course, they might not even have their catch up, so I'm just trying to think of like when you squeeze in that do now. So they miss those 5 minutes of class, which are very crucial for them, but they're not realizing that.
Yeah, and that's something I think, especially when you start to set expectations of time and they come to value time more and they realize like it may only be 5 minutes, but like you said, those 5 minutes are crucial and they need those 5 minutes. So once you set those clear expectations of, we're like, when time is up, and they have to suffer the consequences for not taking good use of their time, they start to respect time a little bit more. But
Yes.
like you said, like if mom drops you off late, like that's mom dropped you off late. Like sometimes there aren't things that you can do. So I personally pick my battles when it comes to things like do now. Something else I'll do that I find is really helpful, my principal actually recommended it. I'll do something like I will type the do now out in the chat. I will write the whole question in the chat. So if someone's late and is like, Mr. Morales, what's the do now? I tell them to scroll back up in the chat.
Yep. Yep, I do that too. So I kind of like have a what's it called? Like I should start putting it in the hub as well, but no, I don't do it in the hub. But usually I have like clear instructions in the hub, and then I'll have instructions on my little classroom. What's it called? Like the classroom webpage that I use,
Mm-hmm.
where I have the timer, and I'll put the do now, like the kind of like the instructions of the day, the agenda for the day, and that's been really helping me a lot. And then I'll have like kind of like what you were saying. I'll put it in the chat, but not. I don't always do it, and it's not because I forget. It's just because sometimes like the things that I'm doing is just like, okay, I'm sharing a link or a Google Doc or something like that, you know? So I'm
Yeah.
just like, huh. So sometimes I do, when I first started, like I was just like typing everything out, but then I'm like, man, this is not that it was a waste of time, but I'm just like, man, this takes up a lot of time. And then when we first got situated with kids online, we're just like, man, like sometimes they're showing up late and all that. This your little doggy?
This
Oh,
my little doggy. Yeah, he was crying, so I figured I would hold him so he would be quiet.
at
And I
least you
also
have
think,
someone to come for you.
yeah, I have two. The other one's asleep over there in the corner. But I also think that we talked a lot at the beginning about transition times, and I know that was something you were concerned with. So I think ultimately that's a decision that you make in the moment. Like, is it going to be beneficial to type this out right now, or is this something that I need to continue on? So I
Yeah.
kind of play those by ear because you're right. It is really exhausting to kind of type them all out, and it can be very time consuming, especially if the question's a little lengthier. So as you get more comfortable and get to know your kids more, you'll know like this is one I need to type out. It's worth the time that I'm going to lose
Yes.
to type this
Yeah.
out.
And I know some teachers are just like, no, I make the kids go to the hub. I make them click on the assignment for today. But sometimes I feel like that in itself is a waste of time for the students and for the teacher, because you're waiting for the student. You're it's almost like you're waiting on the student to get there. Once they get there, is everyone there? Okay. All right, now this is what we're gonna do. Right? So it's almost that I feel like that wastes a lot of time for me at least. I don't
Yeah.
know how it is with other teachers, but I know I've heard a lot of teachers are like, oh, that's what I make them do. And in my case, I'm just like, if I have the link and I can share the link, I'm gonna share it right away on the chat. I'm not gonna waste for 2, 3 kids because sometimes the Wi-Fi is not a strong signal for most students. So I'm just like, I don't want someone to be like, oh, my Wi-Fi is running slow, because it is going to be running slow. They don't have the best internet, so I have to be considerate of that.
Yeah. And I think that that is one of those things that it's different for every teacher.
Hold on,
And I,
hold
oh,
on.
yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
No, you've got kids. You have to do what you have to do. You're multitasking.
Yes.
But I think you need to decide what's right for you as a teacher. Just because other people do other things doesn't mean that you have to do them too. I very much fall in line with you where I put it in the chat and I say, this is what we're doing, because sometimes the hub doesn't work. Or, like you said, sometimes internet is down and it's easier just to put it in the chat. But I also think it's important that you do set structured time to say,
Sorry, I'm
you're
listening.
okay. To say, like, I'm putting the link in the chat. You have 2 minutes to get there. You do need to give them some leeway time because, we're trying to shorten transitions, but we're not trying to completely get rid of them. They do serve their purpose and they help seamlessly go from one activity to the next. So while I agree that sometimes that is counterintuitive to make them go through all those steps, we can't completely deny them the time to get to where we need them to be.
That's true. I do have cases where like a student comes in late, like 20 minutes late,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, "Where are we at?" And I see them on the chat, and I just stay quiet. And I was gonna ask for your opinion on that. I just stay kind of quiet, and I'm like, "No, someone else should be able to step up. One of my students should be able to step up and tell them what we're doing." And sometimes I don't even catch it, but then I do catch it sometimes, and I don't say anything. But I want to see if a student helps another student out, and sometimes it's very effective. Um, sometimes I feel like students learn from other students, of course, and they're like, "Oh, we're doing this right now. This is exactly what," and they give clear instructions, and so I'm just like, okay, should I step up as a teacher and like, because I'm like in the middle of lecture, but I see it in the chat coming in, but I'm like, no, I need to say what I need to say. I'm keep going because if I stop for the student, it's gonna throw me off a little bit. What do you think about that?
So that definitely happens to me too. I had a student come in the like 37th minute today, and he wanted to know what he had missed. And I wanted to say everything, but that basically, because,
Yeah.
class is over in 6 minutes, my friend. But I think that's another point when you have to, because it has to happen split second, but you can think about it a little bit in advance, because we do know things like this happen. Think to yourself, is it going to be beneficial to stop and take the time to catch the student up? Think about it in transitions. How long is it going to take you to redirect that student and then return to the lesson, versus how long would it take to continue the lesson and catch that student up later? So if it's something quick, like we're on CNN.com, here's the link. Sure, go for it. But if you're in the middle of a lecture and it's detrimental to stop and redirect one student at the detriment of the rest of the class, I think that's a decision that you have to make. And I think that's a good point to think about time to yourself. How long is it going to take me to redirect this student, and is that beneficial to the whole class?
Yeah, I've realized that sometimes, like my mentor, when I was doing my student teaching, like it will literally get to her when, uh, when a student will come in and will be like, "What are we doing, miss?" She'll be like, don't interrupt me, like, and I'm like, I don't want to ever be like that, like, so I'm mindful of the student, but at the same time I'm mindful of the 29 students who are focused, listening, ready, paying attention. And so I'm still like learning like how to pick my battles, kind of like what you're saying, like pick my battles, like, okay, so do I leave the 29 to help that one student, or just quick pause, okay, we're doing this on CNN or whatever, so if it's something quick like that, then yes, it's worth it, but sometimes it's not worth it because it'll throw me off big time. So I'm still learning that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you'll learn more as you go. And I think also the more you set these time expectations, students will be more mindful of, I've missed 10 minutes of class, I've missed stuff, and now I don't know where I am. And that will start to resonate with them a little bit more, especially when you're holding them accountable for time and you've lowered your transition times and more work is happening in class. They're going to realize, like, I've missed stuff. I can't be late like this.
Yeah.
So Well, I don't want to keep you much longer because I know you've got kids in there. Do
Yeah.
you feel that, I mean, I know I only showed you 2 slides. It was a really quick model. Do you feel like that was enough for you to go on, or would you like me to model it a little further? Because I feel confident in what you're currently doing.
I would still want to like check out your class. Like,
Absolutely.
I know it's a whole different ball game with high school students, but maybe you could share your video, like some video of you teaching your kids. I think that would be pretty cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so you have 2 options. Would you like to come see a class live, or would it be easier for you to just watch one later?
Watch one later.
Okay, no problem. So I tried to record today and it told me like I ran out of storage space, which I didn't know was possible.
On
So
OneDrive?
yeah, apparently it says I ran out of space on Microsoft Stream, which is apparently where our videos go. So I called IT. They think it might just be the computer. So if today's video did save, because I recorded it, if it saved, I'll send that to you because I liked today's lesson. If not, I'll send you one shortly. And then if you ever want to, so I teach 10th and 11th grade. I teach 10th grade history and then I teach 11th grade college prep. So I think the history class would be more applicable to what you're doing. So that's what I'll focus on. And if
Okay.
you ever want to come to a live class, I teach them from, what time do I teach them from? I teach them from 12:30 to 2, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Do you teach at that
Oh,
time?
I have lunch at 12:15, so maybe I might be able to hop in for a little bit. That'd be
Yeah.
that'd be
So
cool.
I'll send you the last class's video. And then after watching that, if you'd like to see it live and see it like happen in real time and see how I deal with kids being late and all the things that we just talked about, if you want to come, just let me know and I'll add you to the team and you can just pop in on a day that works for you.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to really quickly just review because I have access to it. Maybe I don't know if I do. It just went away, so maybe I don't. Hold on.
The
This
kids getting hot
computer.
chips.
Hey, I haven't eaten lunch yet, so you do what you got to do. I feel you. Okay, so I just wanted to remind you, I had sent you these checklists. Did you have a second to fill them out? It's okay if you haven't yet, because I know you were going out of town.
Mm-mm. I did not, but I can try to take care of it tonight. Maybe send
That
me a
would be
reminder.
Yeah, I'll send you a text reminder if you would just quickly go through these. Just as a reminder, like you don't have to hold yourself to these. This is not gospel, but these are just checklists are an important part of the impact cycle. It's how we hold ourselves accountable and make sure that we're on track. So I made you 3. I made you one for the physical classroom timer, the one that you chose. And I think we can already check all of these off because you're using that great website. And then I made one on utilizing the timer in the classroom and then verbalizing time, which is what I've kind of modeled for you today, was how to verbalize time. And it's in order. So for example, teacher explains activity and time limit. So that is what I did when I said, this is to be typed in the chat before class starts. So that would put a check mark there. Teacher
Okay.
communicates expectations for work within the time limit. That's like when I said you have 2 questions that should be answered in 5 minutes. That would be another check mark. Teacher sets and begins the timer. Teacher makes timer visible to students. Teacher provides verbal reminders. Teacher clearly states when time is up. And then class transitions to the next activity, honoring the timer. If you can follow these, if you can check these all off in order every single time, I would call that successful implementation of time in
Yes.
your class. And do what's right for you. So if you're thinking to yourself, like, hey, making the timer visible to students doesn't work for me, cross that one out. That's fine. So this checklist is something that you can make work for you. This is just what I set up as a model for what these things should look like.
Yes, ma'am.
Nope.
I think that makes perfect sense. Um, I really like so. How do you, rather than like typing it at every single class, do you just have it like on a Google Doc like next to you, and you have your do now questions, like what you're gonna type into the chat? Do you just have it on a Google Doc, or do you just copy paste exactly from the slide that you're working on?
So I use currently while I'm at home and when I'm teaching from my office, I have two computer screens. So I have the presentation up on the left, like I have right now. I have the presentation up on the left one and I'm looking at you on the right one. And so I'll just copy and paste over. But when I'm in a situation, like if I'm I'm a floater. So if I'm in someone else's classroom and I'm just living off of the laptop, I do have a Google Doc that I kind of follow. And I use that as almost like my own agenda, and I'll copy things out of there. And I also think that's really helpful for time as well. If you write out the whole day or the whole period, not the whole day, but if you write out the whole period and you can start to gauge yourself like, hey, do nows, you don't have to give it a solid amount of time, but for example, do nows should not take 20 minutes. Do nows should take 5. But the direct instruction, that should take 20 minutes. And you can kind of gauge time for yourself, and it also helps keep you accountable. But yes, I do have a separate place where I copy and paste these things from. Sometimes I'll think things up on the fly, and those I have to type in. Sometimes I'll have like a moment of genius, and I'll be like, we're doing this. But for the most part, I write it out first, and I follow that.
So yesterday, just like a little side note, yesterday, like we were working on practice questions for the snapshot, and my partner teacher's like, we're gonna do this for like first, second, third, right? And in my head, I'm like, okay, it makes sense, but the most important thing that I want the students to know is the practice questions. What the practice question is gonna look like on the snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than like spending so much time on giving them their grade from the last formal assessment, I'm like, why am I gonna? Does that make sense? Like I just, and that took me 3 periods to realize that. I was like, why am I spending so much time trying to give them the grade? I'm just gonna jump right into teaching them about the questions and how to dissect the questions, etc. Right? So I was like, okay. And then at the very end, I was like, okay, this is your grade from your last formal assessment.
And I think that it's good that you recognized, later than you wanted to, but you did recognize like, hey, I am not using my time as well as I could. And you made those adjustments. And it would have been better if that happened in first period instead of third. But as long as you catch yourself and you redirect yourself moving forward, I think that's what's beneficial. And now you have that mindset for the next time something like that happens.
Yes, ma'am.
You're fine. I know you were doing like 50 things at once right now.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Yes, ma'am. I'm good though. I'm a really, I feel like I'm a good multitasker. Some teachers are not like my partner teacher. He just works on one thing at a time. He can't be doing one thing, can't be answering his phone, can't be checking this. And I'm just like, maybe that's just how that's how maybe I grew up, or I'm considered a millennial. Maybe I'm just like all over. But sometimes that has its flaws, that it has flaws. Hey, get back in the classroom. Come back in. The bell hasn't rang yet. Erase the board.
Is it about time to dismiss?
Yeah, we have like 5 minutes.
Here, why don't I go ahead and let you go so that you can head to dismissal. I'm going to send you a reminder tonight to do those checklists.
Yes, please.
And then we will touch base shortly. I go back to work tomorrow, so the rest of the week might be bananas for me. So we'll probably touch base at the beginning of next week on our next steps, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect. Well, have a good dismissal, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care, Miss